Hello everyone and thank you for the wait. Please remember to like, share and subscribe to the channel. And without further ado, Brutal-Fairytales, Stray Dog's Redemption, Part 11. Alastair led Astaroth and Rook to a building with maces, knives, and swords displayed behind a barred and caged window. Everything behind the window looked like they should be in a museum, or displayed on a wall. Astaroth looked up at the sign in the shape of a long sword with "Ye Old Blades" written in neon lights. The sign was made to look like "Ye Old Blades" was engraved onto the sword. Astaroth looked through the display window. He and Rook had seen this place a few times before, but they thought that it only sold antiques, or replicas of the Dark Times weaponry. So, they never went inside the store. Astaroth never liked swords and never once thought of himself as a swordsman. He could swing a blade like anyone untrained with a blade could. In truth, he preferred guns over swords. He would prefer it if his enemies could not get close to him in a fight. After all, this was the modern era and things like swordsmanship were a dying breed. No one was exactly running into battle with long swords and long bows anymore. Those days were long since past but seem like they would never be forgotten. He still respected anyone who had dedicated their life to their craft, even if that includes swordsmanship. That type of battle had now mainly become used in nothing more than tournaments and Olympic events. Bringing a sword onto a modern battlefield would only get you killed quickly. He personally, however, just did not like swords and would much rather prefer to be a safe distance away with a high-powered rifle and a zeroed-in scope. After all, explosives and sharpshooting have not failed him yet. It did not seem like they were about to fail him now. So why should he fix what simply was not broken? Things like honor or dying in glory were just excuses. At the end of the day, whoever walked away from the fight alive was still the one who was alive at the end of it. So, who truly won in the end? This can't be the right place, Astaroth proclaimed. No, this is the place, Alastair quickly stated. As Alastair pushed the buzzer next to the door, he looked up at the camera above it. He waited for a few seconds before the door opened up on its own. Just like any weapon shop, this one too also had an automatic locking door that would make sense that the owner would have such a thing, since undoubtedly there were several expensive weapons inside. Still, Astaroth was under the pretenses that this place only sold swords and the like. Just what in the world would they be doing trying to sell guns to a blade shop? It was not like the shop had the money. After all, swords are not exactly cheap to make. Astaroth's opinion of Alastair was starting to get pretty low. He wondered if Alastair truly thought that they would buy the stuff from them. As the door opened, several loud bells rang out from it. Astaroth noticed the brass bells hanging behind the door as Alastair held it open for him and Rook. Astaroth looked up at the bells attached to the door for a second, then looked at Alastair and rolled his eyes. As they walked into the store, Alastair closed the door behind them. The bells chimed once again as the door shut. Astaroth looked around the shop. It was like he entered into a world set in the past. All across the walls were weapons on display, beautiful replicas of Renaissance paintings, and a replica of an antique wallpaper. Classical music played over the speakers and was carried across the showroom floor. Finely made and decorative carpet covered the floor. Several display cases full of all types of weapons prominently displayed inside the cases. The room felt more like they had entered a museum than a weapons store. The way everything was set out and displayed from generation after generation, it helped the feeling of moving through the history of Zion. Against the middle of the wall was a strange mechanical device with a lever on its side. Astaroth and Rook had never seen its like before. It was a large machine. It did not seem like it belonged in a place like this. Astaroth and Rook began to wonder just what it was used for. They had no idea what it was for, but on its top was Gods of the Forge painted across it in white paint. Behind the counter, a man stood examining his merchandise on the wall in front of him. Even his attire was old-fashioned. He seemed like he just stepped out of time. A black top hat, black leather gloves, and examination glasses. A red velvet waistcoat with a decorative design, on top of a white button-up dress shirt. Dark brown pants with worn black boots. He seemed more akin to a curator of this museum than a salesman. Astaroth started to wonder what this place is. He looked at the man and wondered why he dressed as he did. He was so focused and so in his own mind that he did not hear the bells ringing. "I love this place," Alastair stated, looking around the room. The man heard Alastair's voice, then he quickly looked back and saw them standing in front of the doorway. "Good to see you again, young sir, and how are you doing today?" the man stated, tipping his hat at them. Astaroth and Rook noticed that even his speech and mannerisms were old-fashioned. He spoke not just with words but with his hands as well. "Oh, you brought a new customer today." "My name is Francis Steamwell, at your service, young sir. How can I serve you today, young sir?" he said as he noticed Astaroth and Rook standing next to Alastair. Astaroth said, pointing to Alastair. "We brought some stuff for you. Some stuff that I haven't seen yet and may want to keep," Alastair explained as he walked up to Mr. Steamwell and put the makeshift bag on the counter in front of him. "Let's see what we've got here," Mr. Steamwell said as he pulled out a knife and cut the rope and unfolded the jacket. Mr. Steamwell carefully examined the weapons and laid them out in order. Alastair looked over the weapons as Mr. Steamwell laid them out one by one. He was organizing them from size and caliber as Astaroth and Rook walked up next to Alastair. As Mr. Steamwell put the last one on the counter, he took off his glasses and looked at Alastair. "Young Mr. Nite, tell me now where you got all this right now, please," Mr. Steamwell asked. "We killed some Hobgrim and took it from them," Alastair answered. "Oh, okay, please wait here for a while. As I run the numbers, I can't sell stolen goods. As for the homemade ones, I'll see what I can do with them," Mr. Steamwell explained as he took out a pen and paper. He wrote down the numbers on the guns, then went to the back. Alastair looked over all the weapons inside the display cases. Astaroth and Rook looked over the strange mechanical device. As they waited for Mr. Steamwell to return from the back room. After several minutes, Mr. Steamwell walked back into the room. Alastair quickly ran back to the counter. Astaroth and Rook looked over at Alastair and Mr. Steamwell before they walked back to Mr. Steamwell. "Okay, so they all checked out, now let's do this. Let me see your identification card," Mr. Steamwell said as he looked over the weapons. Alastair and Astaroth handed over their identification cards. Mr. Steamwell quickly looked over their identification cards and handed them back to them. Alastair and Astaroth put their cards away as Mr. Steamwell cleared out a spot for some of the weapons that they could legally own. "Okay, the knives and this sword, obviously. This is .38 semi-auto pistol. This .22 pump-action rifle, this single-shot .20 gauge. This .20 gauge over, under double-barreled shotgun, and this .22 semi-auto pistol. Of course, you're more than welcome to any of the handmade firearms, but I cannot testify to their craft," Mr. Steamwell explained as he lined up the guns in front of them. He had a point. After all, the handmade guns were not exactly factory-made. One faulty weld, one loose bolt, or one worn spring, and it was much more likely to have a bomb in your hand than a firearm. That was always the problem with Hobgrim weapons. There was not exactly like they had a factory seal, as it were. It could work great, or it could just blow up in your hand. They did not know the person who made them, so there was no guarantee of the level of craftsmanship the creator had behind them. This would be a completely different matter if they knew the craftsman behind the weapons. Most of the Hobgrim master craftsmen have their own unique seal or brand tacked onto the weapon somewhere. It was a way to confirm the weapon was good. These weapons, however, had no distinguishing marks, which means that they were slapped together by the Hobgrim themselves, or they removed the maker's mark. Astaroth quickly grabbed the under double-barreled shotgun and a long karambit knife. Astaroth looked over the shotgun and loved the black steel barrels and dark walnut wood. He put the stock against his shoulder, feeling the weight and feel of the gun against his shoulder. Alastair took the Damascus long steel sword. Alastair looked over the Damascus steel of the blade. He felt the weight of the blade in his hands. "Is that all?" Mr. Steamwell asked. "Yes, sir," both Astaroth and Alastair said. "You do like Damascus steel, don't you, Alastair?" Mr. Steamwell asked. "I really like the way it looks. It just has the organic flow through it, and it's good metal for blades," Alastair answered. "Folding and twisting is how they get the design." "Don't forget to keep up your sword training, Alastair, and always remember that swords never run out of bullets," Mr. Steamwell explained. Astaroth looked at Mr. Steamwell. He knew that he was right. Astaroth also knew that if you make every bullet count, then you don't need a long, heavy blade. Alastair seemed to love swords. He seemed like a child on his birthday as he held the blade. At that point, Astaroth fully understood what Mr. Steamwell just said. Was Alastair spending time training with a sword? Was he trying to become a swordsman? That all but confirmed it for Astaroth that Alastair was a complete idiot. He was going to die pretty young with that mindset. After all, rushing an enemy with a blade in hand was only going to get you shot. However, it was Alastair's life, and it was his choice. If he wanted to go running around the battlefield with a heavy long sword, then he was more than welcome to. Astaroth just needed to keep him close. After all, he preferred his meat shields within bullet blocking distance. "Yeah, I know how it's made. Galber showed me a long time ago and I've been practicing every day, Mr. Steamwell," Alastair stated in excitement. "Don't you want the other sword, Ash?" Alastair asked, looking over at him. Astaroth just glared at him, then showed him the shotgun across his shoulders. "I prefer guns, thank you," Astaroth coldly answered. "Okay, so are you selling or trading?" Mr. Steamwell asked, looking at the rest just to lift the cold mood. "Trading?" Astaroth asked as he put the karambit knife into his belt that held up his pants. "Well, yeah, I still can't give you a weapon that you can't legally own, so keep that in mind," Mr. Steamwell explained. "I don't see a thing I want." "Do you see anything, Alastair?" Astaroth said, turning towards him. Alastair looked at him in shock. Astaroth looked at him and leant his head to the side. I took the boomstick, it's only fair," Astaroth stated with broken speech. Alastair could not believe Astaroth. "Who are you?" Alastair asked. "I will hit you," Astaroth answered. That's the you I know. Alastair said. Astaroth quickly punched Alastair in the side. And he's back to normal. I don't see anything I need. Alastair said, rubbing his side where Astaroth hit him. So, sell then? Astaroth asked. Sell. Alastair answered. Okay, I'll give you $180 for the lot. Mr. Steamwell stated, looking back at the weapons. Deal. They said together. What's that thing? Astaroth asked, shouldering the shotgun before he looked at the machine across the room. That's a God of the Forge, I just got it a week ago. Give me a moment and I'll show you how to use it. Mr. Steamwell said as he counted out their money. As he handed out the money, Astaroth quickly took and counted it himself. Then he handed Alastair his half, as Mr. Steamwell walked over to the machine. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, then wiped the top of the machine and lever. With the handkerchief in hand, he held onto the ball of the lever. Now this beauty is the newest machine from the Mage Academy. It is a Gods of the Forge machine. Now young sir, please slide your identification card here. Mr. Steamwell said, pointing at the slot on the machine. Astaroth slid his identification card into the machine. The screen in the middle of the machine lit up as Astaroth's information was displayed. As a large compartment under the screen slid out and opened up in front of them. Inside the lid of the compartment was a glass plate with grid lines through it, both on the opener and base plates. Now just put your weapon inside. Mr. Steamwell said, pointing to the compartment. Astaroth put his trench hammer in the compartment. Mr. Steamwell carefully pulled the lever down. The sounds of gears turning came out from the machine. As the lid to the compartment shut tight, it slid back into the machine. A loading bar flashed on the screen. Astaroth looked over at Mr. Steamwell. He just watched the machine with a childish smile on his face. Once it got to 100%, a picture of the trench hammer showed on the screen. There were several element names showed on the screen next to the button adjacent to it. Okay, now, this machine can carve and added power or elemental runes to any weapon, gear slots, special modifications like paint. Or can make weapon modifications to your shooting irons as well. As long as it does not exceed your weapon class. Now go ahead, just pick a rune from the list here, and it will show us where it can put the rune. Then it will show how much it will cost to add the rune. Mr. Steamwell explained, pointing to the screen. Astaroth pushed the button with electricity next to it. As he pushed the button, a confirmation post appeared on the screen. Astaroth pushed the yes button, then please insert $20 to continue flashed on the screen. Mr. Steamwell pointed to where Astaroth was to enter the money. Astaroth inserted the money into the machine. The sounds of heavy machinery rung out of inside the machine. As a loading bar flashed across the screen. As it reached 100%, the sound stopped. Then "Would you like to continue" appeared on the screen. Astaroth pushed the no button. After a few seconds, the compartment slid back out and opened up. As the lid popped open, smoke and the smell of machinery oil poured out from the compartment. Astaroth waited for a second as the smoke cleared. Then he saw his trench hammer inside the compartment. He took it out and looked at the rune carved into it. Mr. Steamwell pulled the lever down, pulling the compartment back into the machine. As the compartment slid back into the machine, Astaroth's identification card slid back out. Astaroth put his identification card back in his wallet. He could not believe how easy using the machine was and how fast it put the rune on the hammer. "How do you know that it even works?" Alastair asked. Astaroth paused for a moment. Alastair was right. How could he know if it worked? Astaroth touched the head of the hammer to Alastair's arm and electrocuted him. The electricity shot through Alastair's body, locking up all his muscles, Astaroth quickly took the hammer off Alastair. "So does it work?" Astaroth asked coldly. "Yes, god damn it," Alastair shouted as he rubbed the electrical burn from the hammer. "Okay," Astaroth said, petting Alastair's side. "Yeah, I taste purple," Alastair stated. "So, if this machine can make modifications to any weapon, isn't this dangerous?" Astaroth asked, turning towards Mr. Steamwell. "Ah yes, I see what you mean, but the machine keeps records of everyone that uses it. Once you give it your ID card, it starts recording your name, the date, what weapon, what modifications you got. Every day I have to send it to the state, so they'll know everything," Mr. Steamwell explained. Astaroth just quietly nodded his head at Mr. Steamwell. "Okay, I will be back to use the machine again if you don't mind." "Rook, we got to get going," Astaroth said, looking at his pocket watch. "Hey, wait, it's only 3 o'clock," Alastair said. "There's something I need to do," Astaroth said, petting Rook before he headed towards the door. "Okay, I'll catch up with you later then," Alastair stated, waving at them. Astaroth just waved goodbye to them as they headed to the door. Astaroth and Rook stood outside the old blade and looked around. Astaroth lit a cigarette as he and Rook walked down the street. They made their way back to the general store before a loud emergency siren roared through the city. It could be heard throughout every inch of the city. They suddenly stopped. They looked up at the public announcement speakers. The speakers atop a long stone pole across the street from them. The speakers set facing down every street around it. Astaroth watched as the people around slowly stopped what they were doing and looked at the speakers. Astaroth could see the fear in their eyes as they looked at it. They knew that siren meant that was an ill omen for the city. After the siren stopped, a woman's voice came onto the speakers with an inhumanly calm tone to her voice. "Attention citizens, may I have your attention for a moment, please? Please remain calm and listen carefully to this announcement. Earlier today, the members of the Black Priesthood were notified of dread rats in the city. Please know that of all the rats found, only 3 of the bodies were found to be carrying the cartilage virus. By order of Father Maximus, Braswin, effective immediately, all water must be run through a water purifier. Then boiled at 200 degrees for 30 minutes before it will be safe to drink. If you or anyone you know is experiencing or exhibiting the following symptoms: skin rash, blistering, coughing blood, abnormal breathing, overaggression, open hostility, paranoia, schizophrenia, and finally crying blood, please notify the authorities immediately. If you are caught harboring anyone infected with the virus, they will be seen as a potential terrorist, and you will be punished to the full extent of the law, including a life sentence incarceration. Please contact the Black Priesthood at once. If you suspect one harboring an infected person, please contact the Black Priesthood. This is for your safety. Thank you for your time, God bless you, and God bless the nation," the woman explained with a very calm voice. "She has got to be a machine, Rook. I just know it," Astaroth stated coldly as he looked at the speakers. Astaroth and Rook could see the fear that quickly shot through the city. Everyone turned their heads, looking at each other, examining each other for the symptoms. Everyone slowly returned to their lives but kept an eye out on everyone around them. Astaroth and Rook walked into a goods general store. He could truly care less about the state of affairs. To him, he would leave the world to its own business so long as the world left him alone to his own. This was just a normal thing for the city ever since the plague hit the city years ago. Astaroth's grandmother was about in her mid-20s or early 30s when the plague first hit the city. His own father was not even born yet, and he himself was not even a thought. Still, that nightmare continued to haunt the city, it continued to haunt the country. Everyone was afraid of a resurgence of the virus. The mass evacuations, the mass burnings, that was still too fresh in some people's minds. Still, it was hard for him personally to be afraid of it. After all, he was even born when the virus first struck the city. So many people were so scared of such a small thing. So small that it could not even be seen by the naked eye. Yet it was powerful enough to shake the entire country to its very core. Astaroth could not think about that right now. He had to do what he had to do while there was still time left in the day to have it done. He grabbed one of the shopping carts and quickly loaded up 2 of the 50-pound bags of dog food. His dogs were gonna need it to get them through the coming weeks. He grabbed some fresh ground beef with vegetables mixed in it and a jug of water for his brother as he had done before. He got himself one of the sandwiches from the snack bar and one of his favorite drinks just as he had done before. With Alastair's ordeal out of the way, he simply fell back into his routine. This was no different to him, it was just another day of the week. This was his routine. After all, his routine kept him safe, his routine kept him sane. He quickly paid for everything, and just as before, he quickly set off towards the city park. To be continued in part 12. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the story so far. Please remember to like, share and subscribe to the channel, and please tell us what you think of the story so far. Thank you.